Today we're gonna talk about law and regulations in Canadian and international food safety regulations course. First, let's get our hands on some concepts. Global Harmonization Initiative. So what is a Global Harmonization Initiative? It is a strategic approach aimed at aligning international food regulation and safety practices. It's like a global consensus on the scientific foundation of food regulations, aiming to reduce discrepancies across countries. Then, let's look at food laws. What is a food law? A food law is a set of rules governing food production, distribution, consumption. It's like a rule book for the food industry, aiming to protect consumers, ensure fair trade practices, and reduce the risk of unsafe food. And we should remember that food laws don't guarantee safe food, but they do help to minimize the risk. And in Canada, let's see, the Food and Drugs Act, FDA, and the Food and Drug Regulations, FDR, Safe Food for Canadians Act, SFCA, Safe Food for Canadians Regulations, SFCR, and the Consumer Packaging and Labeling Act, these are key components of food law. And we should know that Food and Drugs Act, FDA, it is the primary law, and it outlines rules on food labeling, advertising, claim, food standards, and compositional requirements. Okay, and then we're gonna have some terminology explained. So we can see that each act has a corresponding regulation, right? For instance, SFCA has the Safe Food for Canadians Regulation, SFCR, right? So we're gonna look at some terminology. So what is an act? An act is a broad law passed by a legislative body like Parliament, right? While a regulation is a specific rule made under an act, providing detailed measures to implement the act. They both have legal force. Acts and regulations. Acts and regulations, they both have legal force, but an act is made by the legislature, while regulations made by an authorized body under the act. Okay, and then we're gonna look at the statutes. Statutes are laws made by Parliament or the legislature and are also known as acts. Okay. And statutory law is written law passed by legislature. It includes acts and regulations. Okay, and guidelines are departmental documents that are used to interpret legislation and or regulation. And please note that although they may be derived from legislation and are often used to advise how one might comply with a regulation, guidelines do not have the force of law. Okay, and then we take a look at this one. Documents incorporated by reference, IBR. So they are like the guest stars in food safety. They are documents that are not in the text of regulations, but are made a part of the regulations, right? It's magical. These documents can be updated more rapidly in response to new science or an emerging health risk, ensuring that our food safety standards are always up to date. For example, list of permitted food additives. Okay, and then let's look back at these four laws. They are like the rule books for all foods at all levels of trade. They ensure that consumers can make informed food choices based on truthful and non-misleading information, right? It's like a truth serum for food labels. And we should know that FDA and FDR, they prescribe the standards for labeling and composition of food and drugs. It's like the recipe book for food safety, ensuring that everything is up to standard, whether it's dairy products, meat, fruits, vegetables, or even water and ice. There are specific standards and regulations that must be met. Okay, and the CFIA, which we'll talk about in the next video, they enforces the FDA by inspecting against the standards in FDR. Okay, and moving on to marketing authorization. So marketing authorizations are regulations made by the Minister of Health. They exempt products from specific prohibition in the FDA and FDR, which we just talked about, right? And you can think of it as a golden ticket. This authorization allows the minister to make general rules permitting the sales of foods and the use of substances that are in or on foods. For example, AMA would allow the sale of a new type of food additive that has been proven safe and beneficial. It also permits the use of substantiated health claims. So if a food product has been significantly proven to lower cholesterol, MA could allow this claim to be made on the product's packaging. In essence, marketing authorizations are a tool that helps government to more rapidly authorize or amend approvals of products and substances with beneficial health impacts for consumers. Okay, and then we're gonna take a look at this one: investigation, notification, complaints, and recalls. So these comes from the SFCR Part 4, Preventive Controls Division 5, and you can think of it as a Sherlock Holmes of food safety. You know, it requires an investigation if a potential non-compliance or food safety issue is identified. It's all about being proactive rather than reactive. So, if there is a risk to human health, immediate CFIA notification and action are required. It's like calling 911 for food emergencies, and just like a good detective it maintains written procedures to handle and investigate complaints and recalls. For instance, a health inspector might find improper food handling in a restaurant, or a customer might report a foreign object in a packaged meal, or a company might need to recall a product due to contamination. All these scenarios require swift action and a thorough investigation. And then we can see that we're going to talk about this part: non-compliant and disposed food products. So these four laws are like the judges of the food world, determining what's compliant and what's not. You know, of course, CFIA has the authority to seize, detain, and dispose of food products that don't meet the Canadian requirements. So let's give an example. Imagine a truck carrying imported fruits being stopped for inspection, a warehouse full of seized counterfeit food products, or a batch of contaminated food being destroyed. You know, these are non-compliant and disposed of food products scenarios. Okay, and then let's move on to talk about the food laws in other countries. So first, let's look at the U.S. So in the U.S., the Food and Drug Administration, which is FDA, you know, everybody knows them, established a system known as Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point, HACCP, for the seafood industry in 1995. And in 2011, the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, was passed, emphasizing a proactive approach to preventing food safety issue. And then let's comparing the SFCR and the FSMA. You know, both laws aim to protect consumers and ensure food safety, but they approach it a slightly different way. Okay, the SFCR focused on establishing a comprehensive framework, while the FSMA emphasizes a proactive approach, okay, to prevent food safety issues. And then let's move to EU. You know, in the EU, they have the General Food Law Regulation, and we should know that the European Food Safety Authority is responsible for scientific advice and support. So that's all for today. Let's see you on the next video.